Sarah met his gaze calmly, her expression neutral, but not unfriendly. She didn't smile or wave or acknowledge him in any dramatic way. She simply looked at him with the quiet dignity of someone who was completely comfortable with who she had become. The wedding march began, and Victoria Ashworth appeared at the back of the aisle. She was everything Marcus had described wanting in a wife. Tall, blonde, elegant, wearing a wedding gown that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. The dress was a masterpiece of designer craftsmanship, with intricate beadwork and a train that required 2 assistants to manage as she walked. Victoria moved with the poise and confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention, her smile radiant as she began her walk toward the altar. But as she progressed down the aisle, she noticed that her groom wasn't looking at her. Marcus was still staring at someone in the front row, his expression one of shock and confusion rather than joy and anticipation. Victoria followed his gaze and saw Sarah for the first time. She had never met Marcus's ex-wife, but she could immediately sense that this woman in the impressive uniform was significant. The way Marcus was looking at her, the way the entire room seemed to be holding its breath. Something important was happening that Victoria didn't understand. The bride's steps faltered slightly as she tried to process what she was seeing. She had heard Marcus's version of his first marriage many times, how he had been married to an underachieving woman who worked a dead-end job and couldn't keep up with his social and professional advancement. But the woman sitting in the front row didn't look like an underachiever. She looked like someone who commanded respect and had earned significant recognition in her field. Victoria reached the altar, but Marcus was still distracted, his attention divided between his bride and the unexpected presence of his ex-wife. The officiant, Reverend Patricia Williams from one of Phoenix's most prestigious churches, had to clear his throat twice to get the groom's attention. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Williams began, his voice carrying the authority and warmth that had made him the preferred choice for Phoenix's elite social events. "We are gathered here today in the sight of God and this community to celebrate the union of Marcus and Victoria in the sacred bond of marriage." But Marcus wasn't listening to the familiar words of the ceremony. His mind was racing as he tried to process the implications of Sarah's presence. She wasn't supposed to look successful. She wasn't supposed to look confident. She was supposed to be broken, defeated, a cautionary tale about what happened when someone wasn't good enough for his world. Instead, she looked like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. The ceremony continued with the traditional readings and prayers, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. Instead of focusing on the bride and groom, many of the guests were stealing glances at the decorated firefighter in the front row, trying to figure out who she was and why her presence seemed to be affecting the groom so profoundly. When Reverend Williams asked if anyone had objections to the marriage, the room went completely silent. Sarah didn't move, didn't speak, didn't make any gesture that could be interpreted as an objection. She simply sat with perfect military bearing, hands folded in her lap, watching the ceremony with polite attention, but her presence was objection enough. Without saying a word, without making a scene, she had transformed Marcus's perfect wedding into a showcase for her own achievements and a reminder of his spectacular failure in judgment. The ceremony continued with the exchange of vows. Marcus stumbled through his prepared words, his voice lacking the confidence and conviction that should have marked one of the most important moments of his life. Victoria spoke her vows with growing concern, sensing that something was seriously wrong but unable to understand what was happening. When Reverend Williams pronounced them husband and wife and invited Marcus to kiss his bride, the moment that should have been the culmination of their love story felt hollow and perfunctory. Even during his wedding kiss, Marcus's eyes kept drifting toward Sarah, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, Marcus's eyes found Sarah's one more time. She stood with the rest of the congregation, her uniform crisp and perfect, her medals catching the light from the chandeliers. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge him in any way. She simply watched him pass with the calm dignity of someone who had found peace with herself and her choices. The reception began immediately in the club's grand ballroom, with cocktails served while the wedding party took photographs in the club's rose garden. The space was transformed into something from a magazine: ice sculptures, floral arrangements that belonged in a museum, and a live jazz ensemble that had been flown in from New Orleans specifically for the occasion. Sarah remained in the ballroom, quietly observing the celebration swirling around her. She accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and found a position near one of the floor-to-ceiling windows where she could watch the festivities without being in the center of attention. But attention found her anyway. Other guests began approaching her, drawn by curiosity about her impressive uniform and the obvious significance of her decorations. "Excuse me?" said an elderly gentleman in an expensive suit, his wife standing beside him wearing enough jewelry to fund a small charity. "I couldn't help but notice your medals. That's quite an impressive collection of decorations you're wearing." "Thank you," Sarah replied politely. "I'm Captain Sarah Martinez with the Phoenix Fire Department." The man's eyes widened with recognition. "Captain Martinez, you're the firefighter from the chemical plant incident. I saw the coverage on the news." "That was extraordinary work. You saved hundreds of lives that day." Word spread quickly through the cocktail crowd. Within minutes, Sarah found herself surrounded by guests who were more interested in talking to her than in discussing the wedding. They asked about her career, her medals, her work with the Emergency Response Division. They wanted to know about the chemical plant rescue, about her advancement through the ranks, about what it was like to be a woman in such a dangerous and demanding profession. "How do you know Marcus?" asked a woman in a silver gown who introduced herself as Victoria's law school roommate. Sarah paused for a moment, considering how to answer. "We were married once, several years ago." The woman's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You're his ex-wife? But Marcus always said his first wife was—" "Well, that she wasn't very accomplished professionally." "People change," Sarah said diplomatically. "Or perhaps people reveal who they really were all along." The conversation spread through the reception like wildfire. Marcus Wellington's ex-wife wasn't the failure he had described to his friends and business associates. She was a decorated hero, a respected leader, someone who had achieved more in her career than most of the people at this elite gathering would accomplish in their entire lives. Across the room, Marcus was having his own difficult conversations. Victoria had cornered him near the bar, her wedding dress flowing around her like a white storm cloud, her expression a mixture of confusion and growing anger. "Who is that woman, Marcus?" Victoria demanded in a low voice, trying to keep their conversation private, despite the dozens of guests and photographers surrounding them. "My ex-wife," Marcus said reluctantly, loosening his bow tie as if it were suddenly too tight around his neck. "Your ex-wife is a decorated fire department captain?" "Marcus, you told me she was some kind of underachiever who couldn't hold down a real job." "You said she was working as a basic firefighter and would never amount to anything significant." Marcus glanced across the room where Sarah was signing someone's cocktail napkin while they took a selfie with her. "I had no idea she had advanced so far in her career. When we divorced, she was just a regular firefighter." "She's been getting more attention at our wedding than I have," Victoria said, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to maintain composure. "People are asking for her autograph, Marcus. They're treating her like a celebrity while they're barely acknowledging the bride." "Victoria, please, can we discuss this later? This is supposed to be our wedding day." But Victoria was not going to be put off. "No, we'll discuss this now, because what I'm seeing tonight is making me question everything you told me about your first marriage. That woman doesn't look like a failure, Marcus. She looks like someone who has accomplished extraordinary things. So either you lied to me about her, or you were too blind to see her worth when you had her." Meanwhile, Sarah had excused herself from her admirers and stepped out onto the club's terrace to get some fresh air. The Phoenix sunset was painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the distance. She needed a moment to process what was happening inside. She had come here simply to be seen as the person she had become, but the effect was far more dramatic than she had anticipated. Marcus's wedding had become a celebration of her achievements rather than his happiness. The guests were more interested in talking to her than to the bride and groom. The entire evening had shifted to center around her presence rather than the occasion it was supposed to commemorate. Maria appeared beside her on the terrace, having arrived as Sarah's guest after finishing her shift at the fire station. "How are you holding up?" Maria asked, joining Sarah at the railing overlooking the golf course. "I'm fine," Sarah said honestly. "Actually, I'm better than fine. I feel complete, like a chapter that was left unfinished has finally been closed. Half the people in there want to hire you as a security consultant for their businesses. The other half want you to speak at their corporate events. You've become the most popular person at Marcus Wellington's wedding." Sarah laughed softly. "That wasn't my intention. I just wanted him to see that he was wrong about me." "Oh, he sees it now. He looks like he's going to be sick. And his new wife is not happy about any of this." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus appeared on the terrace. He had removed his bow tie entirely, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled from running his hands through it. He looked around to make sure they were alone, then approached Sarah with obvious reluctance. "Sarah," he said quietly, his voice carrying none of the confidence and authority she remembered from their marriage. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Maria looked at Sarah questioningly. Sarah nodded reassuringly. "It's okay. I'll be right back." Maria reluctantly returned to the reception, leaving Sarah and Marcus alone under the desert stars. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "I didn't expect you to come," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You invited me," Sarah replied simply, her tone neutral and calm. I thought you'd look—" He struggled for words, his usual eloquence deserting him completely. "Broken, defeated, ashamed," Sarah supplied, her voice steady and without bitterness. Marcus nodded miserably. "I'm an idiot. I'm a complete fool." "Yes, you are," Sarah agreed without hesitation, and her directness seemed to surprise him. "I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too proud and too stupid to see what I had," Marcus continued, tears forming in his eyes. "Sarah, you're incredible. You always were incredible. I was just too blind and too insecure to recognize it." Sarah studied his face carefully. He looked genuinely remorseful, but also lost and desperate. "Marcus, you didn't destroy me. You revealed me. When you told me I wasn't good enough, I had to decide whether to believe you or prove you wrong. I chose to prove you wrong. But I was so wrong about everything," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Your career, your potential, your worth as a person. God, Sarah, you save lives for a living. You're a captain. You have the Medal of Valor. You're respected by everyone who knows you, and I threw you away because I was embarrassed by your job." "You weren't embarrassed by my job," Sarah said quietly but firmly. "You were threatened by my independence. You needed me to feel small so you could feel big. You needed me to believe I was lucky to have you so I would never realize that you were lucky to have me." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, further disheveling his appearance. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make up for what I did to you." "You can't fix this, Marcus," Sarah said gently but firmly. "This isn't broken, this is finished. You made your choice 3 years ago when you decided I wasn't good enough for your world. I made my choice when I decided to discover who I really was without your limitations holding me back." "But I still love you," he said desperately, reaching toward her as if he could somehow bridge the gap that his own actions had created. Sarah stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. "No, you don't love me, Marcus. You love the idea of having been married to someone successful. You love being able to tell people that a Medal of Valor recipient was once your wife. You love the reflected glory that comes from my achievements. But you don't love me. You never really knew me well enough to love me. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He had been so focused on his regret about losing Sarah that he had forgotten about Victoria entirely. "What if I could know you now?" he asked desperately. "What if I could be better? What if I could be the man you deserved?" "Marcus," Sarah said, her voice carrying a note of gentle finality. "You just got married 3 hours ago to a woman who deserves better than a husband who's standing on the terrace confessing his feelings to his ex-wife during their wedding reception." The reality of what he was doing, the betrayal of Victoria, the selfishness of his behavior, the complete inappropriateness of the moment, crashed down on him like a collapsing building. "Go back to your wife," Sarah said firmly but not unkindly. "Try to be the man she thought she was marrying. Learn to see her value and appreciate her accomplishments before you lose her the same way you lost me. Don't make the same mistake twice." Marcus looked at her one more time, his face filled with pain and regret and the dawning realization of what he had lost through his own arrogance and insecurity. "Sarah, I'm sorry for everything, for not seeing who you were, for not supporting your dreams, for making you feel like you weren't enough when you were more than I deserved." "I forgive you," Sarah said simply, and the words carried a finality that made it clear the conversation was over. But forgiveness doesn't mean going backward. It means being free to move forward. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding that he was being dismissed, and walked back toward the reception with his shoulders slumped under the weight of his realization. Sarah remained on the terrace for a few more minutes, watching the lights of Phoenix spread out below her like a glittering carpet. She felt a profound sense of closure, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had finally been lifted from her shoulders. When she returned to the reception, the party was in full swing, but she could see the tension between Marcus and Victoria even from across the room. They were dancing, but their body language suggested they were having an intense conversation disguised as a romantic moment. Other guests were pretending not to notice the obvious strain between the newlyweds. Sarah found Maria near the champagne fountain, watching the drama unfold with obvious satisfaction. "Ready to go home?" Maria asked. Sarah nodded. "I think I've accomplished what I came here to do." As they made their way toward the exit, Victoria intercepted them. The bride looked beautiful but strained, her perfect makeup unable to hide the stress and confusion in her eyes. "Captain Martinez," Victoria said formally, her voice carefully controlled. "Thank you for coming tonight." Sarah could hear the subtext. "Thank you for showing me who I really married." "Congratulations on your wedding," Sarah replied diplomatically. "I hope you'll be very happy together." Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice so their conversation couldn't be overheard by the nearby guests. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah nodded. "How long did it take you to realize that his problem wasn't really with your career but with your independence?" Sarah considered the question carefully. It was a perceptive question from a clearly intelligent woman who was beginning to understand the pattern of behavior she had just married into. "About 2 years after the divorce," Sarah said honestly. "But I had a good therapist who helped me understand the dynamics of emotional manipulation." Victoria managed a small, sad smile. "I think I'm going to need the same kind of help." Sarah pulled out her phone and quickly sent Victoria a text with Dr. Jennifer Wu's contact information. "She's excellent. She helped me understand that my worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it." Victoria looked surprised by the gesture of kindness from the woman whose presence had just destroyed her wedding day. "Why would you help me?" "Because you deserve better than what I got," Sarah said simply, "and because I think you're strong enough to demand it once you understand what you're dealing with." As Sarah and Maria left the Phoenix Country Club, they could see the valet bringing their simple fire department sedan to the front entrance. Around them, luxury cars waited for their wealthy owners. But Sarah felt richer than all of them combined, not in material wealth, but in purpose, accomplishment, and self-worth. "How do you feel?" Maria asked as they drove away from the club, the lights of the reception fading behind them. Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching the city lights pass by the window. "Complete," she finally said. "For the first time since my divorce, I feel like that chapter of my life is truly finished." "And what's the next chapter going to look like?" Sarah smiled, thinking about the opportunities that lay ahead of her. She had recently been approached about leading a federal task force on emergency response coordination. There was talk of her running for Phoenix City Council on a public safety platform. The International Association of Fire Chiefs wanted her to chair their committee on women in leadership. "I don't know exactly," she said, "but I know it's going to be written entirely on my own terms." 3 months later, Sarah was in her office at fire headquarters when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't immediately recognize. "Captain Martinez speaking." "Sarah? This is Victoria." "Victoria Ashworth." "Well, actually, Victoria Ashworth again. I went back to my maiden name." Sarah sat up straighter in her chair. "Hello, Victoria. How are you?" "I'm getting divorced," Victoria said with a laugh that sounded more relieved than bitter. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what real strength looks like, for giving me Dr. Wu's number, for helping me realize that I had married someone who doesn't actually see women as people, just as accessories to enhance his image." Sarah was quiet, letting Victoria continue. "You were right about him being threatened by independent women. The minute I started questioning his behavior, started standing up for myself, he became exactly the person you described. Controlling, manipulative, always trying to make me feel small so he could feel big." "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Sarah said sincerely. "Don't be sorry. I'm grateful. Better to learn it now than after 10 years and children. And Sarah? I've left the corporate law firm. I'm joining the district attorney's office to prosecute domestic violence cases. I want to do work that matters, not just work that pays well and looks impressive at country club dinners." Sarah smiled. "That's wonderful, Victoria. You'll be excellent at it. You have the intelligence and the strength to make a real difference." "I hope so. I want to help other women find their strength the way you found yours, the way you helped me find mine." After they hung up, Sarah sat back in her chair, reflecting on the unexpected turns her life had taken. Marcus had lost 2 strong women because he couldn't see strength as an asset rather than a threat. But both women had emerged stronger for having escaped his limitations. 6 months later, Sarah received one final communication from her past. This time it was a formal letter, delivered to her office by courier. The letterhead read, "Wellington Development Corporation," but the message was brief and handwritten. "Sarah, I've sold the company and entered intensive therapy. I need to understand why I destroy the good things in my life. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that I'm finally trying to become the man I should have been all along. Thank you for showing me what real success looks like. Marcus." Sarah read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Some chapters needed to stay closed, some lessons needed to be learned in solitude, and some growth needed to happen without an audience. That same week, Phoenix Fire Department announced that Captain Sarah Martinez had been selected to lead a new federal task force on emergency response coordination, a position that would make her one of the youngest and most influential emergency management professionals in the country. The morning she left Phoenix for her first task force meeting in Washington, D.C., Sarah stood in her bedroom, packing her presentation materials along with her dress uniform. The woman in her mirror looked confident, accomplished, and completely comfortable with who she had become. Her Medal of Valor sat in its place of honor on her dresser, along with the other decorations she had earned through courage, service, and leadership. Each medal represented not just an achievement, but a moment when she had chosen to be better rather than bitter, to grow rather than shrink, to serve rather than sulk. As she closed her suitcase, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Break a leg in D.C., Captain. Make us all proud." Sarah smiled and typed back, "Always do." She grabbed her keys, her luggage, and her unwavering confidence, and headed out into the Phoenix sunshine to continue building the life she had created from the ashes of the one Marcus had tried to destroy. At the airport, as she waited for her flight to Washington, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 4 years ago, she had walked out of a penthouse with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. Today, she was flying to the nation's capital as one of the most respected emergency management professionals in the country, invited to help shape policy that would protect communities across America. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been long nights of studying, grueling physical training, moments of self-doubt, and the hard work of therapy to undo years of psychological manipulation. But every challenge had revealed more of her true strength, like a fire that burns away everything unnecessary to reveal the essential metal beneath. As her flight was called, Sarah gathered her belongings and walked toward the gate with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. She wasn't walking away from anything anymore. She was walking toward everything she was meant to become. Behind her, somewhere in Phoenix, Marcus Wellington was sitting in a therapist's office, finally beginning to confront the insecurity and narcissism that had cost him the love of 2 extraordinary women. But that was his journey to make, his healing to pursue, his growth to achieve. Sarah's journey was just beginning. At 31 years old, Captain Sarah Martinez had already accomplished more than most people achieved in a lifetime, but she could feel in her bones that the best was yet to come. The plane lifted off into the desert sky, carrying her toward new challenges, new opportunities, and new chapters in a story that she was finally writing entirely for herself. No one else's approval required, no one else's limitations accepted, no one else's definition of success imposed. She was free, she was whole, and she was exactly where she belonged, moving forward at full speed, leaving the past in the dust, ready to save whoever needed saving next, including herself every single day. From her window seat, Sarah watched Phoenix grow smaller below her until it was just a pattern of lights in the vast desert landscape. Somewhere down there was the fire station where she had found her calling, the house where she had rebuilt her life, and the country club where she had proven once and for all that she was never the problem. But she didn't look back for long. The horizon ahead was calling, bright with possibility and purpose. Captain Sarah Martinez, Medal of Valor recipient, Federal Task Force leader, lifesaver and survivor, was flying toward her future with the quiet confidence of someone who had already overcome the worst and was ready for the best. The end. He invited his ex to the wedding, to mock her, but she arrived as a decorated firefighter. Marcus wanted to shame his ex-wife by inviting her to his grand wedding. He thought she would come looking broken and desperate. But when Sarah arrived in her crisp firefighter dress uniform with 3 service ribbons gleaming on her chest, everyone froze. The same woman he once called worthless now stood as a decorated hero. And that was just the beginning. Once upon a time in the sprawling city of Phoenix, Arizona, there lived a man named Marcus Wellington. He was a highly successful real estate developer in his early 30s, known throughout the Southwest for his luxury residential projects and commercial developments. Everyone in the affluent circles of Scottsdale and Paradise Valley knew him as a man who lived for expensive cars, designer suits, and the intoxicating rush of power that came with closing million-dollar deals. Marcus wore handmade Italian leather shoes that cost more than most people's monthly salary, drove a different luxury vehicle each day of the week, and walked through his world with his head held impossibly high, as if the very ground beneath his feet was unworthy of supporting someone of his caliber. He was proud, loud, and demanded immediate respect from everyone he encountered: waiters, valets, business partners, and especially his employees. His company, Wellington Development Corporation, occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Phoenix. The walls of his corner office were lined with photographs of him shaking hands with politicians, celebrities, and other wealthy developers. Awards and recognitions covered every available surface. To anyone walking into that office, Marcus Wellington appeared to be the very definition of success. But behind the penthouse apartment in the most exclusive building in Scottsdale, behind the collection of watches that could have funded a small charity, and behind the carefully curated social media presence that showcased his glamorous lifestyle, there was a part of his life that filled him with embarrassment and frustration every single day. His wife, Sarah, was nothing more than a firefighter, not a surgeon, not a corporate attorney, not a successful entrepreneur or the daughter of influential parents, just a firefighter with the Phoenix Fire Department, coming home after 24-hour shifts with soot under her fingernails and the smell of smoke clinging to her hair. Sarah Elena Martinez Wellington was a woman of quiet strength and unwavering determination. At 28 years old, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that didn't require expensive makeup or designer clothes, smooth olive skin that spoke to her Mexican-American heritage, intelligent dark brown eyes that could convey both compassion and fierce resolve, and an athlete's build earned through years of physical training and demanding rescue work. She had married Marcus Wellington out of genuine love, not for his money or the luxury lifestyle he could provide. When they first met 4 years earlier at a charity event for burn victims, an event that Sarah attended as a representative of the fire department and Marcus attended for the tax write-off and networking opportunities, she had been completely unaware of his wealth and social status. What had attracted her to Marcus initially was what she perceived as his confidence and ambition. She admired people who worked hard and achieved their goals. What she failed to recognize in those early days of their courtship was that Marcus's confidence was actually arrogance, and his ambition was fueled by insecurity and a desperate need for external validation. For 5 years, Sarah had stood by Marcus's side while working grueling shifts at Phoenix Fire Station 19, one of the busiest firehouses in the city. She had supported his business ventures, attended his social functions, and tried desperately to bridge the gap between her world of public service and his world of private profit. But those 5 years had gradually transformed from a partnership into a battleground, with Marcus becoming increasingly critical of her career choice, her appearance, her friends, and ultimately, her worth as a human being. He had slowly, systematically, and deliberately chipped away at her self-confidence until she began to question everything about herself. The breaking point came on a particularly difficult Tuesday evening in late September. Sarah had just completed one of the most challenging shifts of her career, a warehouse fire that had burned for 16 hours, claiming the life of 1 civilian and sending 2 of her fellow firefighters to the hospital with smoke inhalation. She was emotionally drained, physically exhausted, and carrying the weight of grief that all first responders know too well. The penthouse was eerily quiet when she entered, the only sound the soft hum of the central air conditioning system that kept their luxurious home at a constant 72 degrees. The space itself was a monument to Marcus's success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Phoenix skyline, imported Italian marble floors that were always cold under bare feet, and furniture that belonged in a museum rather than a home. Sarah sat heavily at the kitchen island, still wearing her navy blue Phoenix Fire Department t-shirt and dark cargo pants, her gear bag dropped by the door where she always left it after coming home from shift. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she could still smell smoke on her skin despite the thorough shower she had taken at the firehouse. Marcus entered the kitchen with his characteristic frown already fixed in place. His expensive silk tie loosened around his neck, his voice carrying that particular tone of irritation and condescension that had become increasingly common in their conversations. 7 hours, Sarah, Marcus said, slamming his leather briefcase onto the pristine marble countertop with enough force to make the crystal fruit bowl rattle. 7 hours I spent at the hospital board meeting today trying to explain to the city's most influential medical professionals why my wife insists on pursuing a career that makes her look like a common laborer. Sarah looked up slowly, her eyes still red-rimmed from the smoke and emotional exhaustion of losing a civilian on her watch. Her voice was steady but carried the weight of her grief. Marcus, we lost someone today, a 63-year-old grandfather. He was trying to save his cat when the smoke overcame him. This isn't about your board meeting. Everything is about my reputation, Marcus exploded, his face flushing red with anger. Do you have any idea how it feels to sit in a room full of surgeons, attorneys, and successful business people and have them ask what my wife does for work? Do you know how humiliating it is to tell them that you crawl around in burning buildings and rescue cats? Sarah's jaw tightened as she fought to control her temper. I save human lives, Marcus. I pull children from car accidents. I perform CPR on heart attack victims. I run into buildings when everyone else is running out. How is that humiliating? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, only bitter contempt. Because it's blue-collar work, Sarah. It's what people do when they can't do anything better. My friends' wives are cardiac surgeons making $500,000 a year. They're partners at law firms. They sit on hospital boards and charity foundations. And what are you? You're a government employee who makes $40,000 a year and comes home smelling like a chimney. The words hit Sarah like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. She had heard variations of this speech dozens of times over the past 2 years, but tonight, after losing a civilian, it felt particularly cruel. You knew what I did when you married me, she said quietly, her hands clasped tightly together to keep them from shaking. I was already 3 years into the department when we met. You said you admired my courage. You said you were proud to be with someone who made a difference in the world. Marcus paced around the kitchen island like a predator circling wounded prey, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. That was before I understood what it meant for my social standing. That was before I realized how your career choice reflects on me. Do you think the mayor's wife wants to discuss charity galas with someone who shows up with calloused hands and rope burns on her arms? I always dress appropriately for your events, Sarah replied, her voice becoming smaller and more defensive despite her efforts to remain strong. I've never embarrassed you in public. I've always been supportive of your business. Your mere existence embarrasses me, Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings of their penthouse. What kind of successful man has a wife who risks her life for a government salary? People think I can't provide for you properly. They think I'm such a failure as a husband that my wife has to work a dangerous, dirty job just to pay the bills. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained controlled, drawing on the same inner strength that allowed her to function under pressure during emergency calls. Please don't speak to me like that. I am your wife. We made sacred vows before God and our families. We promised each other for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. Why are you throwing our marriage away like it means nothing to you? Marcus's expression grew even colder, his eyes narrowing as he prepared to deliver what he intended to be the killing blow to her spirit. Because you mean nothing to me now. What good is a woman who embarrasses her husband's career? You eat food I pay for, you wear clothes I buy, you live in a penthouse I provide, yet you insist on being a public servant like some kind of martyred saint. Sarah, you're not a hero. You're a burden on my success. The words hung in the air between them like toxic smoke from one of the fires Sarah fought professionally. She felt something fundamental break inside her chest, not just her heart, but her sense of self-worth that had already been eroded by years of Marcus's psychological warfare. "Don't call me a burden," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Today I held a man's hand while he died. I told his wife and children that we did everything we could. I have saved 47 lives in my career. I have been commended 3 times for bravery under fire. I work holidays and weekends and miss family gatherings to serve this community. My job isn't embarrassing, Marcus. It gives my life meaning and purpose." Marcus turned his back on her completely, looking out at the glittering lights of Phoenix spread out below their penthouse windows. His voice was flat and final when he spoke again. "Enough of your hero complex. I'm done pretending to respect what you do. I won't allow you to continue dragging down my reputation in this city. Tomorrow morning I'm calling my attorney. This marriage is finished." Sarah gasped, as if she had been struck in the chest with a sledgehammer. The finality in his voice, the casual cruelty with which he was dismantling their 5-year marriage, left her breathless. "Divorce? You want to divorce me because of my career? Marcus, have you completely forgotten who I was when you pursued me? I was already a firefighter when you told me you loved me. You said my strength was what made you fall for me." Marcus swung around to face her, his expression cold and calculating as a businessman closing a deal he knew would destroy the other party. "I thought you would grow out of it. I thought you would eventually want something better for yourself, for us. I thought you would develop some ambition beyond risking your life for strangers. I need a wife who enhances my image, not someone who makes me look like I'm married beneath my social station." He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his contacts, as if she weren't even in the room. "By tomorrow evening, Sarah, I want you out of my penthouse. Take your gear, take your uniforms, take whatever personal items you can carry, but don't expect to take anything that belongs to this lifestyle." Sarah felt her world collapsing around her like a burning building in the final moments before total structural failure. She slid off the bar stool and fell to her knees beside the kitchen island, her pride completely forgotten in the face of losing everything she had built with the man she loved. "Please, Marcus, don't do this to us," she begged, her voice breaking with emotion. "We can work through this. I can look into other career options. Maybe I could go back to school, get a business degree. Maybe I could work for the fire department in an administrative capacity. Just give us more time to figure this out." Marcus recoiled from her as if her touch was contaminated, his face twisted with disgust. "There's nothing to figure out, Sarah. You are the problem, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. You will leave tomorrow, and that is absolutely final. This discussion is over." The argument that followed echoed through the penthouse walls for another 2 hours, with Sarah desperately trying to salvage their marriage while Marcus remained cold and unmoved. The building's concierge, security guards, and several neighbors could hear the shouting through the ventilation system, but no one dared to intervene in the domestic dispute of one of the building's wealthiest residents. Sarah's quiet sobs filled the space between Marcus's cruel words as she tried one final time to reach whatever remained of the man she had fallen in love with 4 years earlier. "Marcus, please look into my eyes," she pleaded, her voice hoarse from crying. "Look at the woman who has loved you unconditionally for 5 years, the woman who cooked your favorite meals after working 18-hour shifts, the woman who supported your business decisions even when I disagreed with them, the woman who prayed for your success even when you criticized everything I did. I have given you everything I had to give. Please don't throw me away like I'm nothing more than garbage." But Marcus's heart had been completely hardened by pride, social ambition, and a narcissism that prevented him from seeing anyone else's worth, except in terms of how they reflected on him. He picked up his phone and made a call right in front of her, his voice loud enough for her to hear every word. "Yes, Jackson. This is Marcus Wellington. I need you to prepare divorce papers immediately. Yes, irreconcilable differences. I want this handled quickly and discreetly. Bill me whatever it costs. but I want her out of here as soon as legally possible." Sarah froze in horror, staring at him in complete disbelief. The casual cruelty of calling his attorney while she knelt crying on their kitchen floor was a level of heartlessness that she hadn't believed him capable of, even at his worst. "You already called your lawyer?" she whispered. "You've been planning this? How long have you been thinking about divorcing me?" Marcus looked down at her with complete indifference, as if she were a tenant who had failed to pay rent rather than the woman who had shared his bed and his life for 5 years. "Sarah, you are an anchor, dragging me down to the bottom of the ocean. I am cutting the rope and swimming back to the surface where I belong. If you have any self-respect left, pack your things tonight. By tomorrow morning, I don't want to see any trace of you in my home." Sarah stood slowly, her legs trembling with exhaustion and emotional devastation. She walked with measured steps to their bedroom, a space that had once felt like a sanctuary, but now felt like a mausoleum for their dead marriage. She began folding her work uniforms, casual clothes, and personal items into the same duffel bag she had carried as a rookie firefighter 7 years earlier. Her hands shook so violently that she could barely manage the zippers and clasps. Every piece of clothing she folded carried memories that now felt like lies. Birthday dinners at expensive restaurants, quiet Sunday mornings reading the newspaper together, late-night conversations about their future, intimate moments when she had believed they were building something meaningful together. As she packed, Marcus stood in the bedroom doorway watching her with his arms crossed, his face displaying the emotional range of a stone statue. Not once did he move to stop her. Not once did his expression soften or show even a flicker of regret. He watched her pack like a landlord, making sure a problematic tenant wasn't stealing anything on their way out. Sarah finally lifted her heavy duffel bag, everything she could claim from 5 years of marriage, and turned to face Marcus one last time. Her tears were still falling, but her voice carried a strength that surprised even her. "Marcus, you will regret this decision for the rest of your life," she said quietly but firmly. "One day you will understand what you've lost. One day you will see the truth about who I really am and what I'm capable of. And when that day comes, I hope you remember this moment and realize that you threw away the best thing that ever happened to you." But Marcus didn't answer. He looked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows as if she were already gone, already erased from his life and his memory. With slow, deliberate steps that echoed the rhythm of her heartbeat, Sarah walked out of the bedroom, through the living space that had never truly felt like home, and toward the front door of the penthouse. The luxury that surrounded her, the imported marble, the designer furniture, the crystal chandeliers, felt like stage props in a play that was finally ending. She paused at the front door, looking back one last time at the space where she had tried so hard to build a life with someone who had never truly valued her. The city lights twinkling beyond the windows looked different now. Not like a view to admire, but like a world full of possibilities that she had never allowed herself to explore. Then she whispered to herself, just loud enough for her own ears to hear, "I may be leaving here with just this bag and a broken heart, but I will not remain broken. My worth isn't determined by his opinion of me. My value isn't measured by his approval. I am stronger than he will ever understand." And with that quiet declaration of independence, Sarah Elena Martinez Wellington stepped out of the penthouse, out of the life Marcus had built for them, and into an uncertain but authentic future where she would finally discover who she truly was when she wasn't trying to be someone else's idea of acceptable. The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft whisper, carrying her down from the 40th floor to the parking garage where her 10-year-old Honda Civic sat among the collection of luxury vehicles owned by the building's wealthy residents. As she drove through the empty streets of Phoenix in the early hours of the morning, Sarah had no idea where she was going or what she would do next. She just knew that she was finally free to find out. Sarah drove through the darkened streets of Phoenix with no destination in mind, her hands gripping the steering wheel of her aging Honda Civic as tears continued to stream down her face. The dashboard clock read 2:47 a.m., and the city around her was mostly asleep, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the overwhelming reality of what had just happened. She had nowhere to go. In the 5 years of her marriage to Marcus, she had gradually lost touch with most of her friends from the fire department. Marcus had always found reasons why she couldn't attend their gatherings: important business dinners he needed her to attend, social events that required her presence, or simply his disapproval of her low-class friends who wouldn't understand their elevated lifestyle. Her family lived in Tucson, nearly 2 hours south, and she couldn't bear the thought of calling her parents at 3 in the morning to explain that her marriage had imploded. They had never particularly liked Marcus. Her father, a retired construction worker, had immediately sensed the younger man's arrogance and condescension, but they had supported Sarah's choice out of love for her. As she drove aimlessly through the suburban neighborhoods of Central Phoenix, Sarah found herself thinking about Captain Maria Santos, her former training officer and the closest thing she had to a best friend at the fire department. Maria was a 20-year veteran of Phoenix Fire, a tough but fair leader who had taken Sarah under her wing when she was a rookie and helped shape her into the firefighter she had become. More importantly, Maria had always seen through Marcus's superficial charm. She had warned Sarah early in their relationship that he seemed more interested in controlling her than supporting her, but Sarah had been too infatuated to listen. Now, sitting alone in her car at a red light in an empty intersection, Sarah realized that Maria had been right about everything. Maria lived in a modest ranch-style house in the Maryvale neighborhood, about 20 minutes west of downtown Phoenix. It wasn't the kind of area where Marcus and his wealthy friends would ever venture: working-class families, older homes, cars parked on front lawns instead of in 3-car garages. But it was real in a way that Marcus's world had never been. Sarah pulled into Maria's driveway at 3:15 a.m. and sat in her car for several minutes, gathering the courage to wake up her friend in the middle of the night. The house was dark except for the porch light that Maria always left on as a matter of habit from her years as a firefighter. You never knew when someone might need help in an emergency. Taking a deep breath, Sarah walked up the concrete path to the front door and knocked gently, hoping not to wake Maria's teenage daughter Isabella, who had school the next morning. The porch light flickered on, and after a moment the door opened to reveal Maria Santos, a sturdy woman in her late 40s with graying black hair, pulled back in a ponytail, wearing Phoenix Fire Department sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt from a firefighter's charity run. Her expression immediately shifted from confusion to alarm when she saw Sarah's tear-stained face and the duffel bag in her hand. "Dios mío, Sarah, what happened?" Maria said, immediately pulling her friend into the house. "Are you hurt? Was there an accident? Why are you here at 3 in the morning?" Sarah couldn't speak initially. The combination of emotional exhaustion, relief at seeing a friendly face, and the safety of Maria's home caused her to break down completely. She collapsed into Maria's arms and sobbed with the kind of raw grief that comes from losing not just a marriage, but an entire sense of self. "He threw me out," Sarah finally managed to whisper between sobs. "Marcus, he threw me out of the house. He's divorcing me." Maria's expression immediately hardened with anger, but her voice remained gentle as she guided Sarah to the comfortable, well-worn couch in her living room. The space was everything Marcus's penthouse wasn't: warm, lived in, filled with family photos and books, and the accumulated memories of a real life. "That arrogant bastard," Maria muttered under her breath, then caught herself. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I know you love him, but I never trusted that man. Tell me what happened." Over the next hour, Sarah poured out the entire story: the fight about her career, Marcus's cruel words about her being a burden, the cold calculation with which he had called his attorney, and the devastating realization that the man she had loved and supported for 5 years had never truly valued her at all. Maria listened without interrupting, occasionally handing Sarah tissues or refilling her coffee cup, her face growing more and more angry as the story unfolded. When Sarah finally finished, Maria sat back and shook her head in disgust. "Sarah, honey, I need you to hear me clearly," Maria said, taking her friend's hands in her own calloused palms. "What that man did to you tonight wasn't just cruel. It was abuse, emotional abuse. He has been systematically destroying your self-confidence for years, making you believe that you're not good enough, that your career is embarrassing, that you should be grateful for his approval. That's not love, mija. That's control." Sarah looked up at her friend with confusion. "But he never hit me. He never physically hurt me." "Abuse doesn't have to be physical to be real," Maria replied firmly. "He's been hitting your spirit, your self-worth, your sense of who you are. A man who truly loved you would be proud to tell everyone that his wife is a firefighter. He would brag about your courage, your service, your dedication. He wouldn't try to tear you down. He would build you up." The truth of Maria's words hit Sarah like a revelation. For years, she had accepted Marcus's criticism as legitimate, believing that if she could just be better, more successful, more worthy of his social circle, then he would love her the way she needed to be loved. Now she was beginning to understand that the problem had never been with her. "I don't even know where to start rebuilding my life," Sarah said quietly. "I left with just this bag. All my personal things, my photos, everything else is still in his penthouse, and I doubt he'll let me back in to get them." Maria squeezed her hands reassuringly. "First, you're going to sleep in my spare room for as long as you need to. Isabella will be thrilled to have you here. She's always looked up to you as a role model. Second, tomorrow we're going to get you back on the duty roster at the firehouse. Captain Rodriguez has been asking about you, wondering why you've been taking so many personal days lately." Sarah felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. "I've missed the firehouse. I've missed the crew. Marcus always made me feel guilty about spending time there, like I was choosing work over him." "That's because he was threatened by your independence," Maria said. "He wanted you isolated and dependent on him. But Sarah, you're one of the most naturally talented firefighters I've ever trained. You've got instincts that can't be taught, courage that comes from deep inside, and a heart that genuinely cares about helping people. The department needs you." For the first time in hours, Sarah felt like she could breathe fully. "What if I'm not strong enough to start over? What if I can't do this alone?" Maria smiled, the kind of smile that had gotten Sarah through her first terrifying day as a rookie firefighter 7 years earlier. "Honey, you run into burning buildings for a living. You save people's lives when they're having the worst day they'll ever experience. You've got more strength in your little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. Starting over isn't going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. It's going to be the best thing you've ever done." That night, Sarah slept more peacefully than she had in months, despite everything that had happened. Maria's spare room was simple but comfortable. A twin bed with a handmade quilt, a small dresser, and windows that looked out onto a backyard where Maria grew tomatoes and peppers in raised garden beds. When Sarah woke up the next morning, she could smell coffee and breakfast cooking in the kitchen. She found Maria at the stove making scrambled eggs and bacon, while her daughter Isabella sat at the kitchen table eating cereal and getting ready for school. "Aunt Sarah!" Isabella exclaimed when she saw her. At 16, Isabella was already showing signs of following in her mother's footsteps. She was a volunteer with the Phoenix Fire Department's Junior Firefighter program and planned to join the department full-time after high school. "Hey, sweetheart," Sarah said, managing a genuine smile for the first time in 24 hours. "How's school going?" "It's boring," Isabella replied with typical teenage candor. "Are you going to be staying with us for a while? Mom said you and Mr. Mo Wellington got divorced." "Isabella, Maria warned gently. It's okay, Sarah said. Yes, we're getting divorced. Sometimes adults realize they're not right for each other, even when they thought they were. Isabella studied Sarah's face with the serious expression of someone wise beyond her years. He never deserved you anyway. I could tell he thought he was better than everyone else. You're way cooler than him. After Isabella left for school, Maria and Sarah sat on the back patio with their coffee, watching the sunrise paint the desert sky in shades of pink and gold. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of creosote and mesquite from the undeveloped land beyond the neighborhood. I've been thinking about what you said last night, Sarah began. About the fire department needing me. The truth is, I've been holding myself back for years because Marcus always complained when I took on challenging assignments or worked overtime. He said I was unnecessarily risking my life for attention. Maria shook her head in disgust. That man wouldn't recognize heroism if it slapped him in his perfectly moisturized face. Sarah, you've been playing it safe to keep him happy, but what if you stopped playing it safe? What if you went after everything you've always wanted to achieve? What do you mean? I mean really advancing your career, specialized training, leadership positions. The department is starting a new hazardous materials response team. It's elite, prestigious, and well-paid. It's also dangerous and demanding, which is exactly why you'd be perfect for it. Sarah felt a spark of interest for the first time in years. I've always been interested in hazmat work, but Marcus said it was too risky. Marcus isn't part of your life anymore, Maria pointed out. What do you want to do? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering possibilities she had never allowed herself to explore. I want to be the best firefighter I can be. I want to lead. I want to make a real difference. Then let's make it happen. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah moved into Maria's spare room officially, retrieving her personal belongings from Marcus's penthouse with the help of a police escort when he refused to let her in voluntarily. She was saddened, but not surprised to find that many of her possessions, family photos, books, her grandmother's jewelry, had already been thrown away or donated to charity in Marcus's haste to erase her from his life. But she was relieved to have her fire department gear back, her collection of professional certifications, and the few items that truly mattered to her. Everything else had just been stuff, and she was learning to live with less stuff and more purpose. Captain Rodriguez welcomed her back to Station 19 with open arms, and Sarah quickly fell back into the rhythm of firehouse life. The camaraderie with her crew, the satisfaction of helping people on their worst days, the adrenaline rush of responding to emergency calls, it all reminded her why she had chosen this career in the first place. Within a week, she had applied for the Hazardous Materials Response Team training program. The application process was rigorous and competitive. Written examinations covering chemistry and emergency response protocols, physical fitness tests that pushed candidates to their limits, psychological evaluations to ensure mental stability under extreme stress, and interviews with department leadership. Sarah threw herself into preparation with an intensity that surprised even her. For the first time in years, she wasn't worrying about getting home in time to cook dinner for Marcus or making sure she looked appropriate for his business associates. She could focus entirely on becoming the best firefighter possible. She studied chemistry textbooks until midnight, practiced rope rescue techniques during her off hours, and worked out twice as hard as she ever had before. The physical training felt like therapy, each push-up and sit-up burning away another piece of self-doubt that Marcus had planted in her mind. 3 weeks after submitting her application, Sarah received a phone call that changed the trajectory of her life. Firefighter Martinez? This is Battalion Chief Patricia Thompson. Could you come to headquarters this afternoon? We'd like to discuss your application for the hazmat program. Sarah's heart pounded as she drove to the fire department headquarters building in downtown Phoenix. She had no idea whether she was being called in to be accepted or rejected, but she had done everything possible to prepare herself for this opportunity. Battalion Chief Thompson was a legendary figure in the Phoenix Fire Department, a 30-year veteran who had broken numerous barriers for women in the fire service and was known for her uncompromising standards and fair leadership. Her office walls were covered with commendations, photographs from major incidents, and certificates from every advanced training program the department offered. "Sit down, Martinez," Chief Thompson said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I've been reviewing your application and your service record." Sarah sat up straight, drawing on the same composure that helped her function under pressure during emergency calls. "Your test scores are impressive," Chief Thompson continued. "Top 5% in written examinations, excellent marks on the physical fitness assessment, and your psychological evaluation shows exactly the kind of mental toughness we need for this work. But what really caught my attention was your service record. 3 commendations for bravery, consistently high performance ratings, and something else that's harder to quantify. Your fellow firefighters respect you." Sarah felt a flush of pride, but remained silent, waiting to hear the chief's decision. "I'm accepting you into the hazmat training program," Chief Thompson said with a slight smile. "But I want you to understand what you're getting into. This is 6 months of intensive study and field work. 18-hour days, learning about chemical hazards, radiation exposure, building collapse scenarios, and mass casualty incident management. It's brutal, and not everyone makes it through." "I'm ready for it," Sarah said without hesitation. "Good, because if you complete this program successfully, you'll be certified to handle some of the most dangerous situations the department faces. Chemical spills, industrial accidents, terrorist attacks involving hazardous materials. It's not glamorous work, and it's definitely not safe work, but it's essential work." The training program that began 2 weeks later was everything Chief Thompson had promised and more. Sarah found herself in a class of 12 firefighters, mostly men with more experience and stronger political connections within the department. She was one of only 2 women, and at 28, she was among the youngest candidates. The coursework was demanding beyond anything she had experienced. Organic chemistry, toxicology, structural engineering, radiation physics, incident command systems, and federal regulations governing hazardous materials transport. The instructors were experts brought in from around the country: scientists, military specialists, and veteran firefighters who had managed major disasters. But the physical training was even more challenging than the academic work. Candidates practiced responding to simulated chemical spills while wearing full protective suits that weighed 60 pounds and limited visibility to a small window. They learned to set up decontamination corridors under time pressure, to identify unknown chemicals based on limited information, and to make life-or-death decisions with incomplete data. Sarah excelled from the beginning. Her analytical mind, honed by years of studying emergency medical protocols, allowed her to quickly grasp complex chemical interactions. Her physical conditioning, maintained through years of firefighting work, gave her an advantage in the demanding practical exercises. Most importantly, her experience making high-pressure decisions during emergency calls had taught her to remain calm when others might panic. By the end of the first month, Sarah was consistently ranking at the top of her class. Her instructors noticed her natural leadership abilities, the way other candidates looked to her for guidance during group exercises, her ability to communicate complex information clearly under pressure, and her instinct for developing effective tactical approaches to dangerous situations. But the real test came during the 3rd month of the program, when candidates were required to complete a series of live exercises involving actual hazardous materials. These weren't simulations or classroom discussions. They were real chemical spills, controlled gas leaks, and mock industrial accidents designed to replicate the chaos and danger of actual emergency responses. The final exercise of that month would become legendary in the training program's history. Candidates were called to respond to a simulated chlorine gas leak at a water treatment facility, with the added complication of multiple victims requiring rescue and decontamination. The exercise was designed to test every skill they had learned: chemical identification, tactical planning, team coordination, victim rescue, and incident command under extreme pressure. What made this exercise particularly challenging was that the instructors had deliberately introduced multiple complications designed to create chaos and confusion. Equipment malfunctions, conflicting information from witnesses, changing wind patterns that affected the gas dispersal, and a mock media presence that added public pressure to the response. Sarah found herself appointed as the incident commander for her team of 4 candidates. As she surveyed the scene, a maze of industrial equipment with actors playing contaminated workers scattered throughout the facility, she felt the familiar calm that came over her during real emergencies. This was what she had been training for her entire career. "Listen up," she told her team, her voice clear and authoritative despite the breathing apparatus that made communication difficult. "We've got a chlorine gas release with an unknown leak rate and multiple casualties. Rodriguez, you and Chen establish a decontamination corridor upwind from the source. Williams, you're with me for victim rescue. We go in fast, we follow protocols, and we communicate constantly." The next 45 minutes tested every skill Sarah had developed over 6 years as a firefighter. She led her team through the contaminated facility, locating and evacuating 8 victims, while simultaneously directing the containment of the chemical leak. When one of her team members experienced a simulated equipment failure, she instantly reorganized their tactical approach. When wind patterns shifted and threatened to spread the gas cloud toward a nearby residential area, she coordinated with the mock incident command structure to implement evacuation procedures. Most impressively, when the exercise instructors introduced an unexpected complication, a secondary explosion that trapped 2 team members and created additional casualties, Sarah adapted her strategy without losing her composure. She established a new rescue priority system, repositioned her resources, and successfully completed the exercise with all objectives met and no safety violations. When the exercise concluded and the candidates removed their protective equipment, Sarah found herself surrounded by instructors and senior department officials who had been observing the exercise. Battalion Chief Thompson approached her with an expression that Sarah couldn't quite read. "Martinez," the chief said, "that was one of the most impressive command performances I've seen in 15 years of running this program. You maintained tactical awareness, adapted to changing conditions, and demonstrated natural leadership under extreme pressure. Most importantly, you kept your team safe while accomplishing the mission." Over the following weeks, word of Sarah's performance during the chlorine exercise spread throughout the department. Senior officers who had never paid attention to her before began stopping by Station 19 to introduce themselves. She was invited to participate in advanced training scenarios typically reserved for more senior personnel. But the most significant recognition came during the 4th month of the program, when Battalion Chief Thompson called Sarah into her office for a private meeting. "Sarah, I want to talk to you about your future with the department," Chief Thompson said, gesturing for her to sit down. "Your performance in this program has been exceptional. Top scores across the board, natural leadership abilities, and something that can't be taught, the instinct to make the right decisions under pressure." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but maintained her composure. "Thank you, Chief. This program has challenged me in ways I never expected." "Good. Because I'm recommending you for accelerated advancement. When you graduate from this program in 2 months, I want you to consider applying for promotion to lieutenant and the position of team leader for the new hazmat response unit." Sarah's mouth fell open. "Team leader? But Chief, I'm only 6 years on the job. There are firefighters with 15 years of experience who haven't made lieutenant yet." Chief Thompson smiled. "Experience isn't the same thing as ability, Martinez. You've demonstrated that you can handle responsibility, make critical decisions, and earn the respect of your peers. The new hazmat unit is going to be handling the most dangerous calls in the city: chemical spills, industrial accidents, potential terrorist incidents involving hazardous materials. I need someone leading that unit who won't just follow procedures, but who will innovate and adapt when procedures aren't enough. The promotion would come with a significant pay increase, leadership responsibility over a team of 6 specialized firefighters, and the opportunity to shape emergency response protocols for the entire Phoenix metropolitan area. It was the kind of career advancement that typically took decades to achieve. "I would be honored to accept, Chief," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Excellent. But Sarah, I want you to understand what you're signing up for. As team leader, you'll be responsible not just for your own safety, but for the safety of every firefighter under your command. You'll be making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death for civilians, for your team, and for yourself. It's the kind of responsibility that changes you as a person." Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the rookie firefighter who had married Marcus Wellington, believing she needed his approval to validate her worth, to the woman sitting in Battalion Chief Thompson's office, being offered one of the most prestigious positions in the department. "I understand the responsibility, Chief, and I'm ready for it." 2 months later, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood on the stage at the Phoenix Convention Center as Battalion Chief Thompson pinned the silver bars of her new rank to her collar and placed the Hazmat Response Team Certification Badge on her chest. She was graduating first in her class, with the highest scores in the program's 10-year history. Looking out at the audience of firefighters, city officials, and family members, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. Maria Santos sat in the front row, beaming with pride and wiping away tears. Isabella sat beside her mother, wearing her junior firefighter uniform and looking at Sarah like she was seeing a superhero in person. But the person Sarah was most grateful to see in the audience was her father, Roberto Martinez, who had driven up from Tucson to watch his daughter's graduation. Roberto was a man of few words who had worked construction for 30 years to support his family, and Sarah could see the pride and respect in his weathered face as he watched her receive her certifications. After the ceremony, as Sarah posed for photos with her new team and accepted congratulations from colleagues, she felt her phone buzz with a text message. The number wasn't in her contacts, but she recognized it immediately. "Saw the article in the Arizona Republic about your promotion. Congratulations. You deserve it. M." Sarah stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Marcus Wellington was a chapter of her life that was permanently closed. She had nothing to prove to him, nothing to say to him, and no interest in reopening a door that had led nowhere but pain. 3 days later, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez reported for her first day as team leader of the Phoenix Fire Department's Hazmat Response Unit. Her team consisted of 5 experienced firefighters who had volunteered for the specialized assignment. Firefighter Carlos Rodriguez, a 10-year veteran with expertise in chemical identification. Firefighter Amy Chen, a former Army medic with advanced training in toxicology. Firefighter David Williams, a structural engineer who had joined the fire department after working in private industry. Firefighter Michael Patterson, a former police officer with experience in disaster management, and Firefighter Jennifer Kumar, a recent hire with a chemistry degree from Arizona State University. The unit was housed in a state-of-the-art facility adjacent to Fire Station 7 in Central Phoenix, with specialized equipment worth over $2 million. They had advanced detection devices for identifying unknown chemicals, protective suits rated for the most dangerous substances, decontamination equipment that could process hundreds of victims, and communication systems that allowed them to coordinate with federal agencies during major incidents. Sarah's first few weeks as team leader were spent developing response protocols, conducting training exercises, and building the team chemistry that would be essential during actual emergencies. She quickly earned the respect of her team members, who appreciated her technical knowledge, her calm leadership style, and her willingness to take on the most dangerous assignments herself rather than delegating risk to subordinates. The unit's first major call came on a Tuesday morning in late November. Sarah was in her office reviewing incident reports when the emergency tones sounded throughout the building, followed by the dispatcher's voice over the radio. Hazmat response team to industrial accident. 2847 West Van Buren Street. Chemical spill with multiple casualties reported. Unknown substance. Response time critical. Sarah and her team were suited up and rolling within 3 minutes, their specialized response vehicle racing through Phoenix traffic with lights and sirens clearing the way. As they approached the scene, Sarah could see a massive industrial complex, with workers evacuating the buildings and emergency vehicles already positioned around the perimeter. The incident commander briefed Sarah quickly as her team prepared their equipment. "We've got an explosion at Desert Chemical Supply, a warehouse that stores industrial cleaning solvents. Initial blast killed 2 workers instantly and created a toxic cloud that's already hospitalized 8 more. We've got 3 workers still unaccounted for inside the building, and the chemical cloud is drifting east toward Desert View Elementary School." Sarah assessed the situation rapidly, drawing on everything she had learned during her 6 months of intensive training. The elementary school was only 400 yards away, with 600 children in attendance. Weather reports showed wind patterns that would carry the toxic cloud directly toward the school within 30 minutes if the chemical release wasn't contained. "Rodriguez Kumar, establish air monitoring stations around the perimeter to identify the chemicals we're dealing with. Chen, Williams, set up decontamination corridors here and here. Patterson, you're with me. We're going into the building to find those missing workers." For the next 4 hours, Sarah coordinated a complex rescue and containment operation that would later be studied as a textbook example of hazmat incident management. Her team successfully extracted all 3 missing workers, 2 of whom required immediate medical treatment for chemical burns and smoke inhalation. They identified the spilled chemicals as a combination of industrial solvents that created toxic chlorine gas when mixed, and they contained the spill before it could spread beyond the warehouse property. Most importantly, they prevented the chemical cloud from reaching Desert View Elementary School. Working with the incident commander, Sarah directed the deployment of water spray systems that knocked down the toxic gas and established a safety perimeter that protected both the first responders and the surrounding community. The incident made regional news, with Phoenix Fire Department officials praising the new hazmat response unit's performance during their first major emergency. Sarah found herself being interviewed by local television stations about the rescue operation, though she deflected most of the credit to her team and the coordination of all the agencies involved. 3 weeks later, Sarah received a phone call that would change her life once again. "Lieutenant Martinez, this is Commissioner Janet Blake from the Phoenix Fire Department. Could you come to my office tomorrow afternoon? There's something important I need to discuss with you." Sarah's stomach tightened with nervousness. Had she made a mistake during the chemical plant incident? Was there some problem with her leadership of the hazmat unit? When she arrived at Commissioner Blake's office the next afternoon, she found not just the commissioner but also Fire Chief Michael O'Brien and Mayor David Rodriguez waiting for her. The presence of the mayor made Sarah even more anxious. City officials usually only got involved when something had gone seriously wrong. "Lieutenant Martinez," Commissioner Blake said with a warm smile that immediately eased Sarah's concerns. "Please sit down. We have some news that I think you'll want to hear." Sarah sat in the leather chair across from the commissioner's desk, trying to project confidence despite her racing heart. Fire Chief O'Brien leaned forward with a broad grin. "Sarah, your performance during the Van Buren chemical incident was extraordinary. The textbook response, the lives saved, the prevention of what could have been a catastrophic disaster, it's exactly the kind of leadership we need in this department." Mayor Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. "The City Council met last night to discuss your actions during that incident. We voted unanimously to award you the Phoenix Medal of Valor, the highest honor we can give to a public servant. You'll be the youngest recipient in the award's 40-year history." Sarah felt the room spin slightly. The Medal of Valor was legendary within the Phoenix public safety community. Only 11 people had ever received it, and most of those had been posthumous awards for firefighters and police officers who had died in the line of duty. "But that's not all," Commissioner Blake continued. "We're also promoting you to captain and offering you command of the new citywide emergency response division. You'll oversee not just hazmat response, but also urban search and rescue, tactical emergency medical services, and disaster preparedness for the entire Phoenix metropolitan area." The promotion was unprecedented. Sarah would be jumping from lieutenant to captain in less than 2 years, and the Emergency Response Division was one of the most prestigious assignments in the department. She would be responsible for coordinating emergency response across multiple agencies and jurisdictions, with a budget of over $10 million and authority over nearly 100 specialized personnel. "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered, tears forming in her eyes. 2 years ago, I was told I was a failure, that my career was an embarrassment. Now you're offering me one of the most important positions in the department." Chief O'Brien smiled. "Sarah, talent rises. True leadership can't be hidden or suppressed. What you've accomplished in less than 2 years shows us that we made the right choice in investing in your potential." 6 months later, Captain Sarah Martinez stood in her dress uniform at Phoenix City Hall, receiving the Medal of Valor in front of 300 guests, city officials, and media representatives. The medal itself was beautiful, a gold star surrounded by phoenix flames hanging from a red, white, and blue ribbon, representing courage, sacrifice, and service to the community. As Mayor Rodriguez placed the medal around her neck, Sarah looked out at the audience and saw faces that represented every important chapter of her journey. Maria Santos sat in the front row with Isabella, both wearing their dress uniforms and beaming with pride. Her parents had driven up from Tucson for the ceremony, her father looking distinguished in the suit he typically reserved for weddings and funerals. Sarah's entire hazmat team was there, along with firefighters from Station 19, who had become her extended family. Battalion Chief Thompson sat with other senior department officials, nodding approvingly as the mayor described Sarah's heroism during the chemical plant incident. But most surprisingly, Sarah spotted several faces in the audience that she didn't immediately recognize. Business leaders, city council members, and community activists who had read about her work and wanted to show their support for someone who represented the best of public service. After the ceremony, as Sarah stood surrounded by well-wishers and photographers, she felt her phone buzz with a notification. Another text from Marcus's number. "Saw the coverage of your medal ceremony. You look incredible. I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go. Is there any chance we could talk? M." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to Maria, who was standing beside her accepting congratulations from other firefighters. "What do you think?" Sarah asked quietly. Maria read the message and shook her head firmly. "I think that man had his chance to appreciate you, and he chose to throw it away. You don't owe him anything, not a conversation, not forgiveness, not even a response. You've built a life that's bigger and better than anything he could ever give you." Sarah nodded, deleted the message, and blocked Marcus's number permanently. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had no intention of reopening it. 3 years had passed since the night Sarah walked out of Marcus's penthouse with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. Now Captain Sarah Martinez, Medal of Valor recipient and commander of Phoenix Fire Department's Emergency Response Division, lived in a beautiful southwestern-style home in the historic Willow neighborhood, just minutes from downtown Phoenix. The house itself was a reflection of who Sarah had become, not ostentatious or designed to impress others, but authentic, comfortable, and filled with meaning. The living room walls were covered with photographs from her career, her graduation from the Fire Academy, commendation ceremonies, training exercises, and candid shots with her fellow firefighters. Her Medal of Valor hung in a place of honor above the fireplace, alongside her other service ribbons and certifications. The spare bedroom had been converted into a home office, where Sarah studied for her master's degree in emergency management from Arizona State University. She was taking classes part-time while working full-time, driven by a desire to understand not just the tactical aspects of emergency response, but the broader policy and administrative challenges of keeping communities safe. Her garage housed not designer shoes and luxury handbags, but technical rescue equipment, protective gear, and the Harley-Davidson motorcycle she had bought herself as a promotion gift. Sarah had discovered that riding through the desert on weekend mornings gave her a sense of freedom and peace that she had never experienced during her marriage to Marcus. Sarah's daily routine had found a rhythm of purpose and fulfillment that centered around her work but extended far beyond it. Her days were spent training her teams, responding to major incidents when they occurred, developing citywide disaster preparedness protocols, and representing the fire department at community events and professional conferences. She had been invited to speak at fire service conferences across the country about hazmat response and leadership development. The International Association of Fire Chiefs had featured her in their magazine as one of 30 under 30 rising leaders in fire service. She was frequently quoted in news articles about emergency preparedness and had become a respected voice in the public safety community. But Sarah's evenings were her own, and she had learned to cherish that independence. Sometimes she spent them studying for her graduate degree, sometimes exercising at the gym where she maintained the physical fitness required for her demanding job. Often she simply read quietly on her back patio under the desert stars, accompanied by Ranger, the German Shepherd rescue dog she had adopted 6 months earlier. She had dated occasionally over the past 3 years, but nothing serious or lasting. Dr. Jennifer Wu, the therapist who had helped her process the emotional aftermath of her divorce, had helped Sarah understand that she needed time to rediscover who she was as an individual before she could be part of a healthy partnership with someone else. "You spent 5 years trying to be someone else's idea of acceptable," Dr. Wu had explained during one of their sessions. "Now you need to spend time learning to be completely comfortable with who you actually are. The right person will appreciate you for exactly that, who you are, not who you might become to please them." For the first time in her adult life, Sarah was truly content being alone with herself. She had learned the difference between being lonely and being independent, and she had discovered that she actually enjoyed her own company. Her self-worth was no longer dependent on anyone else's approval or validation. But her peaceful, well-ordered existence was about to be disrupted in a way that would test everything she had learned about herself over the past 3 years. It was a Wednesday afternoon in mid-October when Maria knocked on Sarah's office door at fire headquarters, carrying a strange expression and an expensive-looking envelope that seemed out of place in the utilitarian environment of the fire station. "Sarah, you need to see this," Maria said, closing the door behind her and taking a seat across from Sarah's desk. "What is it?" Sarah asked, looking up from the budget reports she was reviewing for the Emergency Response Division. As a captain, she was responsible not just for operational decisions, but for managing resources, personnel, and equipment across multiple specialized units. Maria handed her the envelope with obvious reluctance. "It came through the department mail addressed to Captain Sarah Martinez, but look at the return address." Sarah's blood ran cold when she saw the embossed letterhead. Wellington Development Corporation. The envelope was thick and expensive, the kind of stationery that Marcus had always used for his most important business correspondence. She opened it slowly, her hands steadier than she might have expected. Inside was an even more elaborate invitation printed on ivory cardstock, with gold foil lettering and embossed details that probably cost more than most people spent on their entire wedding. "Marcus Wellington and Victoria Ashworth request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration. Saturday, November 12th, 7 p.m. The Phoenix Country Club. Black tie required, dinner and dancing to follow." At the bottom, handwritten in Marcus's familiar script, Reserved seating in the front row. Hope to see you there. M. Sarah stared at the invitation without speaking for several minutes, her mind processing not just the words on the expensive paper, but the psychology behind Marcus's decision to send it. Maria was practically vibrating with anger. What kind of sick, twisted game is this? Why would he invite you to his wedding? What does he hope to accomplish? Sarah set the invitation down carefully on her desk, her expression thoughtful rather than emotional. He wants me to see him move on. He wants me to sit there and watch him marry someone who meets his standards of success and social acceptability, someone who won't embarrass him at dinner parties. You're not going, right? Maria demanded. Please tell me you're not even considering this insanity. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She looked out her office window toward the downtown Phoenix skyline, where she could see the gleaming tower that housed Marcus's development company. After 3 years of silence, of building her own life and career, of finding peace and purpose that had nothing to do with him, Marcus was trying to insert himself back into her story. What's his new fiancée like? Sarah asked quietly. Maria had already done some research, as Sarah had known she would. Victoria Ashworth, corporate attorney specializing in real estate law. Her father is a federal judge. Her mother sits on the boards of 3 major charities. Graduated summa cum laude from Stanford Law School. Drives a BMW, lives in a mansion in Paradise Valley, belongs to the country club where they're having the wedding. Basically, she's everything Marcus always said he wanted in a wife. Sarah nodded slowly. Perfect for his image. Beautiful, educated, wealthy, connected to all the right people. She won't embarrass him by having a career that involves getting dirty or taking risks. Sarah, please tell me you're not actually considering going to this wedding. It's obviously a trap designed to make you feel bad about yourself. But Sarah was already thinking several moves ahead, like a chess player contemplating a complex strategy. Marcus was counting on her showing up as the same broken, insecure woman who had left his penthouse 3 years ago. He expected her to feel intimidated by his new life, diminished by comparison to his successful bride, reminded of everything she supposedly wasn't good enough to be. But that woman no longer existed. Maria, Sarah said quietly, what if we showed him exactly who I've become? Maria's eyebrows rose. What do you mean? What if I went to his wedding, but not as the woman he remembers? What if I went as Captain Sarah Martinez, Medal of Valor recipient, commander of the Emergency Response Division? Maria sat back in her chair, beginning to understand Sarah's thinking. You want to go in uniform? Dress uniform, full decorations. I want him to see exactly what he threw away when he decided I wasn't good enough for his social circle. Maria was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Then she smiled slowly. Sarah, that man is going to have a heart attack. His perfect wedding is going to turn into a showcase for your achievements. Maybe that's exactly what he needs to see. The plan began developing that afternoon. Sarah went to the department uniform shop and had her dress blues cleaned and pressed to perfection. She polished her Medal of Valor until it gleamed like a star, arranged her service ribbons in perfect order according to military protocol, and ensured that every brass button and insignia was spotless. Her dress uniform was impressive by any standard. The navy blue fabric was perfectly tailored to her athletic build. The silver captain's bars on her collar caught the light, and the array of ribbons and medals on her chest told the story of a career marked by exceptional service and courage. At the top was the Medal of Valor, the highest honor the city could bestow. Below that, her unit citation for the chemical plant incident that had made national news. Her 3 commendations for bravery, each representing lives saved through her direct action. Her Hazmat Response Team Certification Badge, her Emergency Management Leadership Medal, her 5-year service ribbon, and several other decorations that marked her advancement through the ranks and her specialization in high-risk emergency response. Maria helped her practice walking in the dress uniform, since Sarah rarely wore it outside of formal department ceremonies. They rehearsed her entrance, her posture, her responses to whatever Marcus might say or do when he saw her. "Remember," Maria coached her as they went through the scenarios, "you're not going there to fight with him or cause drama. You're not going to make a scene or embarrass his bride. You're simply going as yourself, the accomplished, decorated, respected woman you've become. Let your presence speak for itself." "I understand," Sarah replied. "I'm not angry anymore, Maria. I'm not hurt or bitter or looking for revenge. I just want him to see the truth about who I am and what I was capable of becoming when I wasn't held back by his limitations." "What if he tries to talk to you? What if he approaches you during the reception?" Sarah considered this carefully. "Then I'll be polite but distant. I'll congratulate him on his marriage and wish him well. But I won't pretend that we can be friends, and I won't give him the satisfaction of thinking that I'm there because I miss him or want him back." The night before the wedding, Sarah couldn't sleep, but not from anxiety or second thoughts. She felt a calm certainty about what she was going to do, a sense of completing a circle that had been left open for too long. She sat in her backyard with Ranger at her feet, looking up at the desert stars and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 years ago, she had left Marcus's penthouse believing that she was worthless, that her career was embarrassing, that she would never amount to anything significant. Tomorrow, she would walk into his wedding as one of the most decorated firefighters in Phoenix history, a leader who commanded respect from her peers and recognition from the community she served. The contrast wasn't lost on her, and neither was the irony. Marcus had thrown her away because he was embarrassed by her career, and that same career had transformed her into someone far more accomplished and respected than he would ever be. Saturday evening arrived clear and crisp, with the kind of perfect weather that made Phoenix a destination for outdoor events. Sarah stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting her dress uniform one final time. The woman looking back at her was confident, composed, and completely comfortable with who she had become. Her hair was pulled back in the regulation style for formal occasions. Her makeup was subtle but professional, and her posture conveyed the bearing of someone accustomed to command responsibility. The medals on her chest caught the light as she moved, each one representing not just an achievement, but a moment when she had chosen courage over comfort, service over selfishness. Maria arrived to drive her to the Phoenix Country Club, since arriving in an official fire department vehicle would send exactly the right message about Sarah's current status and position. "Ready?" Maria asked, though she could see the answer in Sarah's calm expression and confident bearing. "I've been ready for 3 years," Sarah replied. "Tonight is just the confirmation." The Phoenix Country Club was exactly the kind of venue Marcus would choose for his wedding. Exclusive, expensive, and designed to project wealth and social status. The circular driveway was filled with luxury vehicles that collectively represented several $1 million in automotive excess. BMWs, Mercedes-Benzes, Porsches, Aston Martins, and at least 3 Ferraris. The valets were dressed in crisp white jackets and moved with the practiced efficiency of young men accustomed to handling expensive cars owned by Phoenix's elite. The club's facade was elegant Southwest architecture, adobe and stone with dramatic lighting that made the building look like a luxury resort. Sarah's official fire department sedan looked distinctly out of place among the collection of status symbols, which was exactly the point she wanted to make. She wasn't trying to compete on Marcus's terms of wealth and material display. She was operating from an entirely different value system. As she stepped out of the sedan, the valet's eyes immediately went to her uniform, then to the array of medals on her chest, then to her face. He straightened up slightly, recognizing the significance of what he was seeing, even if he didn't immediately understand who she was. "Good evening, Captain," he said respectfully, using the title indicated by the silver bars on her collar. "Good evening," Sarah replied politely, handing him the keys to the department vehicle. Sarah walked slowly up the red carpet that led to the club's main entrance, flanked by elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. Everything about the scene was designed to project luxury and exclusivity, to make guests feel like they were participating in an event of significance and importance. Other guests were arriving in evening wear that belonged on magazine covers, designer gowns, tailored tuxedos, jewelry that caught the light from the decorative torches lining the walkway. The women moved carefully in stiletto heels, their hair and makeup professionally done. The men wore the confident expressions of people accustomed to being the most important person in any room. But as Sarah made her way toward the entrance, conversations paused. Heads turned. The woman in the navy blue uniform with medals on her chest commanded attention in a way that no amount of expensive clothing or jewelry could match. "Is that a military officer?" one woman in a jeweled gown whispered to her companion. "Fire department," the man beside her replied, reading the insignia on Sarah's uniform. "Look at all those decorations. She must be pretty high-ranking." The whispers followed Sarah as she made her way through the club's lobby toward the main ballroom. She could feel eyes on her, hear the murmur of conversations as people tried to figure out who she was and why she was there. When she reached the entrance to the ballroom, she paused to take in the scene. The room was spectacular by any measure. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most people's cars, white roses and orchids arranged in displays that belonged in a botanical garden, round tables draped in cream silk and set with china that looked like it belonged in a museum. A string quartet played classical music in one corner, while servers in formal uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that were clearly prepared by a world-class catering company. Everything about the scene projected wealth, taste, and social status. Sarah's dress uniform stood out like a flame in the darkness, not because it was inappropriate, but because it represented something fundamentally different from everything else in the room. While everyone else was wearing costumes designed to project image and status, Sarah was wearing the symbols of actual achievement and service. An usher approached her nervously, clearly uncertain about how to handle the presence of a uniformed public safety officer at what was supposed to be a private social event. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "Are you on the guest list? I don't recall seeing any uniformed personnel on our security briefing." "Captain Sarah Martinez," she said calmly, her voice carrying the natural authority that came from years of command experience. "I believe Mr. Wellington reserved a seat for me in the front row." The usher checked his clipboard, his eyes widening as he found her name prominently listed among the VIP guests. "Yes, ma'am. Right this way, Captain Martinez." As Sarah walked down the center aisle toward her reserved seat, the effect was electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Silverware paused halfway to mouths. The classical music seemed to fade into the background as 200 of Phoenix's most prominent citizens tried to figure out who this decorated firefighter was and why she was at Marcus Wellington's wedding. She reached the front row and took her seat, exactly where Marcus had planned for her to sit, but not at all how he had imagined she would look when she got there. From her position, Sarah could see the altar where Marcus would soon be standing, the photographers positioned around the room, and the faces of every guest as they continued to stare at her and whisper among themselves. But Sarah felt completely calm, completely at peace with her decision to be there. She wasn't nervous or anxious or concerned about creating drama. She was simply present as herself, the woman she had become after being told she wasn't enough. A few minutes later, the music changed to signal the beginning of the wedding procession.